So I've been doing marketing here in Southeast Texas, marketing consulting work for about 7.5, going on 8 years now. My background is, my educational background is business and marketing specifically. And as a consultant, I've worked for a number of different industries. So I don't have just one particular niche. I have specialized in social media. That's how I got started. And because of the businesses I work with, typically they're very lean office staff, as John was mentioning earlier, you know, one person in an office trying to do it all. And so I've kind of morphed into almost a marketing director for a couple of my larger clients. So that's kind of a little bit about me. To get started, we're going to do a pop quiz. So if you want to turn to the second page of your handout, we'll get started in that way. I do apologize about the screen. They didn't have, I was thinking they were going to have computers here, so we don't have the ability to be hooked up to a projector today, but if everyone can see this okay, and I'll kind of have to, you can see it through there. There you go. So let me know if at any point you can't see it, and we'll try to work with what we got. I'm just glad I actually charged my laptop this morning. So we'll go through a pop quiz. These are going to be different logos from some well-known brands. So you'll see on that second page of your handout, there's some empty spaces. So we're going to go through these quickly. So just write down the first company that comes to mind that is represented by these brands. All right, can you see it okay through there? All right.
Oh, goodness,
huh? Oh, okay. No, so here, we'll go back. So this is number 1, so that's the number 1 spot on your worksheet. And then number 2. And then number 3. 4. 5. At least if I still stump people, that means I've done good.
Okay, I need to stop them.
Yeah. Good, I still stumped a couple people at least. Let's see. Oh, sorry. Too quick. There we go. All right. So let's see how everybody did. So this is there may or may not be a prize depending on if we have ties. That may be an issue. But so keep track of what you get right, and this will just be on the honor system. I'm not going to grade your work. So we'll go through these quickly too for the answers. Obviously, Apple, well-known brand. I just heard a statistic the other day that they actually only represent like 10% of the desktops in the US or something, or even less than that maybe. So it's funny that we think of them as this huge company, but they actually, they still have plenty of, yeah, because they're expensive too. So Google, they actually rebranded a few years ago, and there was this huge discussion online with regards to their new logo, which was really interesting because it didn't change that much. If you weren't paying attention, you may not have even noticed, but people who were fans of the old logo just kind of went crazy. So another well-known brand for reliability, right, with Toyota. Golden Arches of McDonald's. I know we used to see that as kids when we would do road trips. You'd see that big golden arches in the sky. Come on, Mom, can we stop there? Mercedes-Benz, another car company. What do you think of this compared to Toyota? you're comparing the two.
I think Mercedes is more
Upper class, more expensive, more luxurious, right? So there's an obvious difference, even though it's the same type of product, two different reactions. So Nike swoosh, Louis Vuitton. And then we've got, is that Honda, I think, right? Yeah.
Instagram, because I know I've seen those people.
Yeah. Yeah. So even if we don't use the product, right, sometimes we recognize the brand, even if we don't have a personal connection to them. Dallas Cowboys, whether you like them or not, sorry, but so actually Dallas Cowboys, I think they're the second most valuable sports team in the world, actually. And the Library of Congress, I got to throw in at least one to throw some people off. I did cheat a little bit because they actually have Library of Congress incorporated in their logo, so I cut that out. So that's a little cheat. Then Twitter. What comes to mind when you think of Twitter? Especially compared to other social medias.
they Donald Trump.
That's the funny thing. So I think that's one reason that Twitter has kicked Donald Trump off, is because I've done this quiz in a couple of different classes, and over this year, every single class, someone will say Donald Trump. That's what they think of when they think of Twitter.
They also lost a lot of active users.
Yeah.
After they did that.
Yeah. A lot of people have a lot of strong opinions about that. And then, well, Volkswagen, Starbucks, was that the one you needed stock in?
Yes, sir.
Yeah,
Mhm.
me too.
Mhm.
Shell, so it's a large oil company, obviously, gas and oil, energy. Snapchat, so another social media, another one of those, even if we don't personally use it, we may have an immediate connection to it. And this is the Real Madrid soccer team. They're the #1 most valuable sports team in the world. So even though they're above, a lot of us think of Dallas Cowboys because we're in this area. We don't actually know what this logo represents because we're not in that area. So then LinkedIn. So anyone get all 20 by chance? No? 19? 18?
So what was 19? The actual number 19?
Oh, the actual number, that was the Real Madrid.
19 was the Masters.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
where did they go?
That's what I thought. Okay.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Okay.
I didn't keep going. I had one more in there. I'm sorry, the Masters. Okay. So you had 18. Anyone else have 18?
Let's see. I got 17.
Okay. You get a Starbucks card. Speaking of being Starbucks. All right. So I do that because when we think of branding, a lot of times we're thinking of logos, which is a big part of branding for businesses, right? And even if we haven't personally purchased from some of these companies, we have an immediate reaction. We may have an immediate feeling that comes to mind when we see some of these logos. So other kinds of logos that are also well known, but they had the company name obviously represented, so I couldn't use them. Again, come up with evoke different feelings, emotions. We sometimes associate the quality of their products immediately when we see that logo or that name. So branding, as John was saying earlier, branding can be a very big deal. So these are some brands that represent me and my background. So when I think of representing myself with logos, this has a big part because I got my bachelor's here at Lamar University, went on and got a master's at the University of Strathclyde in international marketing, created a company, Restep Marketing, and then went on to be involved and have been involved in different community organizations. So these are some brands that represent me and what I'm doing now at this point in my career. All right, so as we go through your handout, I like to use handouts and a way to take notes, me personally, so I like to give them to people when I'm doing presentations. We'll have some spots through here that we'll work on together, but other places you can fill in the blanks as we go. So a brand, just to kind of think of it in a textbook terms, right? It's all those things that represent a business. So it could be anything from the name to a term that's used, symbols, logos are a symbol, right, for the organization. So all of those things go together into representing a brand. It could even be how our employees represent our company out in the community, right, or our organization. So I know some of us represent nonprofit organizations. I may use the term a lot, businesses and customers, because that's what I'm typically working with. But also as a nonprofit organization, it may be those people we serve through our nonprofit or who benefit from the services that we provide, right? So it could be, as we said, images, experiences, feelings, all of that great stuff. I'm so glad we've got this screen here so I can still see. So when we think of branding and branding our organizations, I like to, there's this, I'm a TED Talk fanatic, and I love this one who talks specifically about what words may represent to different people.
Hi, I'm Josh Miles, and I'm in the branding business. Now that means that we work with our clients to help them tell the stories of their brands. That means we're helping them position their brand, their company, their product or service in a specific place in their client's mind. That's through images or symbols or words or stories. And doing that means that we have to really get inside of our clients' heads. So to do that, we ask our clients to lie down on the sofa and tell us their deepest, darkest secrets, metaphorically speaking, of course. So we take those secrets and we sort of mash that together and come back with something that people want to hear, people want to tune into, people want to see this on prime time. So my role is sort of one part talk show host and one part therapist. So one of the things that often comes out in therapy is sometimes to give our clients what they really need, sometimes we have to be able to save them from what they think they want. And that is a paradox, but that's not the paradox we're talking about today. What we're talking about today is the idea that sometimes your A+ work is not always received or perceived as an A+. So let's go back with me, if you will, in the Wayback Machine to when I was 15 and a half years old in driver's ed. So with my driver's ed instructor riding shotgun, the gentleman was about 1 million years old. I'm not sure he could even see the stoplights or stop signs. And my job basically was to help him run errands during the day. So we would take him to dry cleaners, we'd take him to the bank, we'd take him to get donuts. And in between there, he was trying to give us some ideas of how to not kill everybody on the road. So as it turns out, I wasn't a very good driver's ed student. I turned the wrong way down a one-way street. I was usually speeding. And on my very first day of driver's ed, I murdered a groundhog. Ba-thump, ba-thump. Which, he was definitely dead. My instructor didn't even bat an eyelash, just popping a donut in his mouth. At the end of our class, it was time to get our grades. And my instructor said, Josh, you're not an A driver, but I'm going to give you an A. So it took me a long time to figure out even what that meant. But the important thing for me was on my report card, I had an A for my class. So sometimes we receive a grade that perhaps we haven't actually earned. And sometimes we earn a grade that we don't receive. Now, why is that? Now, I think there's a couple reasons that we see that, especially in the professional world when you're delivering a service. And the ways that we're going to talk about that today are maybe the words that we use, how we've positioned our companies, and the overarching experience. So let's talk first a little bit about words. So a little bit later in high school, our first day of senior year, I was in my literature class.
So how many times have we had within our organizations where we put all this effort in, especially it could be with one particular client, or if we're in the nonprofit world, maybe we're working on a particular service. We do all this energy, all this effort because we know what's going on behind the scenes and we can see everything that's going on. And then deliver that product or service to someone and they come back and they give you a bad review online, or they call and gripe because it wasn't what they were expecting, all those different things, right? That can be really frustrating because we've put in all of that effort for a grade that we do, all this effort for a grade we think we should earn, and then we don't actually get that in the end, right? Or on the flip side, sometimes someone has a much better response to our business or our proposal, and we're like, oh, well, I'm glad you like that because I didn't think that was very good. But that works out. Hopefully it's more the first part. But the way we build and position our brands in the marketplace, a lot of that is being done online now, right? Because we have basically computers in our pockets and our purses. So we have social media, we have Google pages, Google reviews, all these other platforms that now have review opportunities. So we have to think about branding and how are we going to communicate our business or our organization out there for everybody to see, right? I'm going to play it a little bit more for specifically talking about the words that we use and how that relates to businesses.
Always
right. Missed my spot, so I got to get back to it.
With aid, that perhaps maybe the words that we use, how we positioned our companies, and the overarching experience. So let's talk first a little bit about words. So a little bit later in high school, our first day of senior year, I was in my literature class. And you know how when the room is dark and everybody's chatting, and then you have that moment where everybody just realizes the teacher has been there the whole time and he's really annoyed. And the silence just quickly falls over the room. So we realize our teacher is in the back corner of the dark classroom with his desk backed up as far as you could get and still be not in the wall. And he muses from the shadows. I'm thinking of a frog. I'm thinking of a frog. Somebody says, like the amphibian, it's green, it's round, it flies, it's a ribbit. Yes, that is a frog, but I'm afraid that's not the frog I was thinking of. I'm thinking of a frog. So someone else is brave enough to say, like the frog in your throat, you're trying to talk and you can't. Yes, that is a frog, but I'm afraid that's not the frog I was thinking of. I'm thinking of a frog. And the violin player in our class says, that thing on the end of my bow, there's this little part, and that's actually called a frog. Ah, thank you. That is a frog. But I'm afraid that's still, this went on for the entire class period. 60 minutes of what frog am I thinking of? Bell rings, class dismissed. The next morning, the lights are up. Our teacher's walking around like nothing happened. The bell rings, we begin class, and he goes straight into Chaucer. Whoa, whoa, whoa. What was the frog? You got to tell us what frog you were thinking of. He said, you've mistaken the point of the exercise. It was not about what frog I was thinking of. It was about, in my class and in life, even a word as obvious as frog, you have to make certain that your audience understands exactly what you mean. So sometimes when the experience goes south, maybe it's as simple as the words don't work. Other times, perhaps it's more about position. So if you think about how your brand,
so I love this video because it's so interesting to think about simple words that we use and how they can have totally different meanings depending on the person that's receiving that word. And the same thing happens with our brands, right? We have an idea of what our brand is, what our business, our organization, we have an idea of a concept of what that is. Our customers or our target audience, the people we want to reach, may have a different idea of what that is. And then somewhere in the middle, a lot of times is where we find out what our brand really represents. So it's very interesting when you talk about branding, especially the words you use, the phrases and that sort of thing. So to kind of define what we hope people think of our brand, we're going to work on this, the third page of your handout. We're going to take some time to go over our key stakeholders with our business, okay? So for whatever business or nonprofit organization you're representing, I want you to think of who either works with your business or who do you want to work with. So you've got different roles here and then expectations on the other side of what you hope they will say about your business or what you hope their expectations are. So roles could be obviously your target audience, who's your customer, who are you trying to reach. You may have a couple of different target audiences, especially with something like the food bank that comes to mind. I know y'all do not only the food piece, but also school supplies, right? So those could be two different types of target audiences or customers that you're looking at there. It could also be an employee or someone else that works with your business, or with the Henchy House, it could be not only people who may use the house once it's been restored, but it could be also city officials that you have to work with to make that happen, right? So there are a number of different roles that relate to our businesses. So write down what that role is. If it's an employee, if it's a customer, you may want to put a person's name associated with that. If you have a well-developed organization, you may have somebody in a position, you want to think of that person. And then you're going to write down what you hope they say about your organization. Okay, so go ahead and we'll spend maybe just 4 minutes on this. Even if you don't get through the whole thing, that's okay. Just kind of get started. Have some background music.
I thought you were going to do the Jeopardy.
Huh?
I thought you were going to do the Jeopardy thing.
Oh, that would have been good. If you want to say so I have to figure out what it is. And if you get done with that, you can actually go ahead and go to page 4. So on page 4, we'll think about, okay, on page 3, we have these expectations, right? This is what we hope people will say about us, about our business, about our organization, whether that's now or maybe in a year after they've been using our service for a while. Now on page 4, what is at least one thing that you could do as an organization to make that a reality? Right? So what are we going to have to do? Services and the services we provide or the products we provide, maybe it's related to customer service. If it's you want their expectation, or you want them to say in 6 months, they were easy to work with and they communicated clearly. Well, what kind of service do we need to provide to make that happen? Right?
Yeah, that'd be great. Because Christy's making the other ones for me. Yeah, perfect. I can just turn my yeah, I want the MacBook. I want the iPhone, yeah. Perfect, thank you.
Are you going hot dog night tonight? Are you going hot dog?
Yeah, I'll be late though. I'll be coming from up here.
Are you going to get the paints?
Yeah.
I think that's going to be so bad.
Oh, yeah, his was, yeah. all the ones.
All of the above.
Yeah. I'm sure it will be. You gonna be there tonight for hot dogs?
Yes. Yeah. I don't know what time I got to go run errands and maybe I'll see you there.
All right, if we didn't finish up, that's okay. You can always finish up later on at when you get back to your office or later today or later this week. It's you could even get some input from people you work with, right? Because it'll be interesting to see if they have similar expectations of the organization or the business, especially depending on the size. If it's a smaller organization, a lot of times when we start talking about, okay, let's lay out what we want people to say about us later on, and sometimes there's some surprising differences, right? Especially when we talk about the priority. Well, this is the number one thing we need to be doing. Well, that may be a little bit different. If you're doing it all your own, then you get to set some of that. You don't have to worry about anything else spending. Where there's similarities between those different roles and what you hope they say about your business later on. Were there similarities, anything that came out that you're like, oh, here's a pattern here? Yeah, so then that may be something you need to represent in your messaging so that you are putting out what you hope they perceive. We'll talk a little bit more about that in just a little bit too. So this is beginning and branding. And a lot of times we think of branding and marketing as two words we can use for the same thing. Actually, marketing usually falls under the umbrella of branding because branding takes care. Branding is typically thought of everything, including marketing, how your company is perceived, from your topography to the logos to the colors you use, as John was talking about, the images that you use within marketing, and then all of those traditional marketing concepts that we think of. So billboards, TV, radio, social media, online advertising, and all of that good stuff. So as we go through today, we're going to talk about some different elements of a brand. And within your worksheet, you can work through this as we go. Some of this you may want to wait and you can work on it again when you're back at your office, and that's completely fine. But we're going to go through some of the elements that we typically think of when we're talking about developing a brand. So one of those, the very first thing we really need to know is who is your target audience? Who are you trying to reach, right? Because if we don't know that, it's really hard to figure out how should we position ourselves. Obviously, if we want to reach kids because we're a toy company, that is going to look very different than if we are Rolls-Royce, right? So our messaging is very different for those two different groups. So when we're talking about, I'm trying to make sure I'm on the right track here. When we're talking about our target audience, we need to actually outline who that person is. Okay, so you can create, you know, a fake individual even to represent who your customer is. What's their age? What's their background? And it may be a range. It may be a range. And it may be male and female, ages 35 to 45. Whether they're, Mika, are you still doing coaching too? So maybe it's someone who's not, you know, not confident in their physical appearance or not confident in their ability to work out, or not sure of how they should get up and get moving, right? So even things like that that go into building our target audience. So when you think of that for your business, there's some room here for you to actually outline who that is. Now we can't do that for everybody here today, but these are just some elements that you need to think of to represent who you should be reaching out to, right? Another element of our brand is our promise. I'm making sure, since I can't, I'm used to this being up on a screen where I can just reference it, right? So when we're thinking of those target audience, this goes back to those expectations, right? What's our promise that we're giving to our customers? What do we want them to walk away with at the end of the day? What do we think of when we think of McDonald's and what their promise may be to their customers? Any thoughts? The Golden Arches, or we always wish my mom and dad would stop on a road trip, and now I'm like, oh, thank you for not stopping there and feeding us junk food, right? When I think of the health aspect, but what do we think of when we think of McDonald's? What's their promise? Service, okay. Are they fast, slow? Typically fast, as we expect from a fast food restaurant, right? Is it going to be the most gourmet thing? Probably not.
The kids would say toy.
Toy, okay. So, so
they've only been like 2 times, literally, and they're like, "Can we go there and get a toy?"
So, would you think that their Happy Meals are now part of their brand, right? Yeah. And that toy element, if there's not a toy in that box, we have problems. We have to go back and get the toy that they forgot to put. So, yeah, so that's part of the brand. Now, when we think of McDonald's, let's compare it to somebody like Chick-fil-A. Both fast food restaurants. Do you have any different ideas that come to mind when we think of Chick-fil-A? Better service, healthier, okay.
Faster, nicer.
Okay.
They're really nice to me, you know, they always say my pleasure. So
yeah.
They're very different in that.
Yeah. They actually, there's a book about Chick-fil-A, and I haven't actually read it. I need to read it. But they actually did research on using words like "you're welcome" versus "my pleasure." And so that is a part of their brand now. The words that they use, right, is that whenever you finish your order and everything, it's "my pleasure," because it evokes a different reaction from a customer. So there's actually research into that, why they say "my pleasure." So we talked about fast, and we talked about healthier. It may actually not be healthier, but it seems like it's better quality of food, right? So even though it's two similar companies, 2 fast food companies, they have two very distinctive brands and what they represent.
Chick-fil-A tries to make it a little bit more personal when they ask you for your name, because the person who takes your order always asks you the name. When you pick your order up, if you ever notice, the person who hands you your order will always say, "Thank you, Ms. Janetta. Yes. It's good to see you, Ms. Janetta. Here you are, Ms. Janetta. Have a good day, Ms. Janetta." Always will call your name out. I think that's also gives you like a little bit of a personal touch.
So who do you think has more returning customers?
Based on the lines that I wanted to
Probably Chick-fil-A, right? So that the more the loyal customers, right, that are going to go back and go see them. Depends on too. My grandpa always used to love going to McDonald's because they had like 69-cent coffee or something, and it was always hot. Always, that's what he said, and they probably compared to Chick-fil-A actually, because I haven't had nothing. Anyway.
And you could also talk about the co-branding, speaking back on the toys, because their toys are kind of generic. They're learning, they're good.
Yeah.
But Disney and McDonald's,
do
they
their
work toys
together.
together.
Yeah.
And so that's a draw.
Because you never hear anyone say anything about Chick-fil-A and their toys.
Yeah.
You're right. It's
It's a
typically
book
learning.
or is it like a
parent?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep. So those are two different promises that they have for their type of customer, right? And whereas McDonald's has to probably put a lot more effort into their toys and that co-branding with Disney or whatever popular movie and kids movies coming out, they've got to get attached to that. Whereas Chick-fil-A doesn't have to have that part, but they have to go through probably more employee training because they have to make sure they say the right words to their customers as they're going through those lines.
So people talking to kids. They go through the line.
Yeah, there you go. Now, we reference a lot of large businesses when we think of branding, right? And the reason I use a lot of large companies is because they've been doing this for a long period of time and we can all discuss it within a group. It's not out of reach for your own individual company though. It takes consistent effort over a period of time and you do have to still think of these same elements, right? If we're talking about target audiences, Chick-fil-A, McDonald's, Apple, they all have their defined target audience. Well, we can have that for our own business as well. We may never get to the same level where it's recognized internationally, but at least here in our local communities or where your target audience lives, if we're consistent over a period of time, we can get to that point. So as we think through some of these elements, these are things we often overlook, or we may talk about just in discussion as we're developing some of our marketing pieces or our website. A lot of times these kinds of conversations come out in our website because you'll have to be working with someone and they'll say, well, who are you trying to reach? Well, you're defining your target audience. Well, what do you want them to do or purchase or look at when they're on your website? Well, that's part of your brand promises. So the reason we have this beginner session is because if we think about these elements and we define them, then it makes it much easier to go to the next stage when we're actually developing a website or developing a logo or working on a marketing campaign if we already have these things well defined, right? So one thing, I'm not going to take time to go over it today, but on page 6, this is a continuation of what we've already worked on. So we've got our expectations, what we can do to meet those expectations. You can bullet point these. These don't have to be complete thoughts or sentences, but just take some time to go through what your key focus is as an organization. What are the benefits of your service? So that kind of ties back into what you hope people say. And then what do customers or clients think of your organization right now? For anybody, and you can ask them if you have a good relationship with some of your clients, right? What this gives you is actually, in some cases, depending on the workshop, I have a social media presentation I go over, and we actually turn these, if you have 2 or 3 bullet points under each topic, that gives you social media content. Because if you say like, what's one of the services y'all do with Hooks Title?
We do title work and escrow services.
Okay, so if we have those, and then what's the benefits of y'all compared to competitors with Hooks?
We actually have the only sovereign plant in Montgomery County.
There you go. So that would be a benefit of using your service that then you can use, and I would say if you can have that, I mean, that's a pretty big deal. So then that's something you want to put out throughout all of your marketing channels and maybe a social media post on a regular basis about that particular benefit, right? And then do y'all have any customer surveys of where, do you have an idea of where your customers are right now?
Not good. I mean, it's good feedback, but not a good,
Like consistently?
Yeah.
Gotcha.
people do it.
Yeah.
So
This also gives you an idea of if you're meeting, if your customers are in the same place that you want them to be. And sometimes if they're not, that tells us what do we need to focus on. If they don't know that particular element of your business, maybe we need to do some specific marketing to let people know.
Just getting them to open the email. Because everybody who comes in, we get their email and we send them a customer survey right after
Gotcha.
closing. And then it's just getting them to actually do it.
Yeah.
Because I'm like that too.
Do a drawing for like a $50 gift card,
yeah,
and do it in like 3 months. They never even like question when the drawing is going to be. They just see that there's a drawing and they're like, okay,
Yeah.
at least me.
Yeah. Well, and it's one of those, you gotta trust the process, you gotta be consistent, you gotta put it out there, and yeah, it can be hard, but it can be done. Yeah. All right. Yeah. Okay, our section, so that talks, we kind of already talked about that, so I'm gonna skip over this one. So what's our brand value? This helps in further defining some of those key elements that we were just talking about. How do we differentiate ourselves between our business and our competitors? So what's the value of working with you as a particular organization than anybody else? Now, for some of our nonprofits, you know, you may have a very specific target service that you provide that no other nonprofit provides. So sometimes that's nice when you're the only one in the area that provides that particular service, right? But for businesses, we have to be very clear on what is the value of coming to us versus any other type of business, right? So we have to make that clear, and we have to tell people that. We have to put that out there. All right, brand attributes. So going back to page 3 and 4, as we look through these lists, are there any words that pop out to you, or that may be either repeated or that you just really, you really like, you want your business to be represented in that way? You can take some of those words, whether they're listed here or not, but these attributes give us some of those key terms that we want people to know of. Obviously, with Chick-fil-A, we think of them being fast, efficient, friendly, I would say. McDonald's, we would, a lot of times it's thrown in cheap, or maybe cheap is a negative kind of word, but affordable, right? I can take my whole family there for a meal and not spend a lot of money. So that was how they actually first started off their branding when they developed as a company, was the idea that you can take the whole family out to eat at a restaurant, but not spend, you know, $50 at that time. You know, you could spend $20 and have a nice meal for the whole family, right? So when we think of these brand attributes, these are ways of describing your brand and how you want, these may give you some terms you want to use then when you're creating your marketing pieces, whether it's flyers, social media posts, that sort of thing.
So what are these blanks for under this line, the very blank of the brand and the blank of the others?
So that's the core message that it holds, the very essence of the brand and the core values that it holds. Okay. Yeah. And these may change over time, especially depending on the business. If you're a new business that you're still kind of finding your way, this may change over time. As a well-established organization like the food bank, these are typically everyone, hopefully everyone in the company knows what your core values are. If they don't, that may be some internal training that we need to do, right? But typically for a large organization like you or the housing authority, I would assume you've got some clear ideas of what the value of your organization is there for your customers, right, or your clients. For a smaller business, I know for my business, that kind of changed a little bit over the first couple of years I was in business, because I was clearly defining who I was reaching, the types of businesses I was really working with. All right, so what are some attributes that come to mind with some of these different organizations, going back to our quiz, right? Apple, what do we think of when we think of this organization? Trendy. Trendy, what else? Typically in the technology world, right? They keep up on trends, but kind of most up-to-date things. What about Starbucks? Get a Starbucks fan in here too. And some people don't have a positive. Expensive. What else? Some people think it's too strong.
I think, well, I think the taste.
Yeah.
I think they have excellent coffees.
Yeah. So it's you can get to where you have some people have very strong opinions positively for a brand, or some who have very strong opinions in a negative way, right?
Maybe they're consistent, like with what they offer, and if they have it, they change their styles of coffee. They're always trying to do different things.
Especially for having the number of locations that you have, right? That's something I've heard people talk about when they travel. They go to Starbucks because they know what they're going to get. Even if they're not the biggest fan of Starbucks, they can get a clean restroom. They can go in and get something to eat, a quick something to eat, and then some coffee, right? Facebook. Good, bad, and different. Yeah, yeah. Social, yeah.
Events.
Yeah. And it may be bad in some ways, right? Yeah. And then the Mercedes, right? We talked about this earlier. Luxury, quality,
Stylish.
Stylish, there you go.
Status.
There, yep, status symbol, yep. So you can see that these different attributes that are associated, people, this is in general terms, right? Generally, these are things that people think of with these large companies. It may be a little bit different depending on the specific person. If you have a really good experience at places like Chick-fil-A, obviously we get them loyal fans and we have positive feelings. If we have a negative experience, like with some of, I'm not going to name any names, but with some of the restaurants right now and fast food restaurants being low staffed, people may have negative opinions now because it takes long. They're expecting fast food and then it takes them forever. Luckily, Chick-fil-A seems to have been making it work, right? All right, so your brand voice is both internally, now again, depending on the size of the organization, internally, how your message is communicated. Is everyone on the same page? Do we need to do some training within the organization so they know what the voice should be, what the attributes and what we're trying to evoke out of our customers, right? What are the expectations? If your expectations are to be friendly, courteous, fast service, does everyone in the organization know that? And is that their goal when they're going through their daily activities, right? And then externally, how are you represented? This may be obviously going back to the toys example, right? I would think of McDonald's as a little bit more fun, brighter colors, kids have an immediate reaction to the Happy Meal. Does Chick-fil-A have that same sort of attitude?
Chick-fil-A has the playground. McDonald's doesn't have anyone, so
there you go.
That's what I think.
Yeah.
Hopefully they're opening soon.
But they're a little bit more of a serious fast food restaurant.
They're kind of quick and yeah, just red and white, and they're friendly, but not anything.
They make it so convenient for you. Now they walk to your car.
Yeah.
They're right there. You can pay for everything.
Yeah, that's true.
You can do everything out.
Oh, how is that? I haven't tried that yet.
It costs an
It does.
Oh,
If you do waiter, you'll be paying more for the delivery than the food.
yeah, I know. I don't always use Waiter anymore because of that, but anyway.
They do it on the app.
Yeah, on the app. I like that.
Oh, okay.
And sometimes they'll offer it for free.
Good to know.
Get free stuff.
Rewards.
So then they have a very different position compared to their competitors, right, in the marketplace, because they have a consistent message. They know who they are, what they represent. They know what they want to evoke out of their customers. And so they're very clear on their brand position compared to competitors in the marketplace. So if you want fast, quick, and easy, and you have to have the toy, you're probably going to McDonald's, or depending on if the kid has any say and they want to go to McDonald's, versus Chick-fil-A, where again, fast, but I'm going to get a more pleasant experience maybe going through Chick-fil-A. So I'm by myself, I don't have the kids with me. I'm going to go to Chick-fil-A because they say my pleasure at the end and it makes me feel just so good, right?
And if you have a million and one great grandkids or great nephews that you're trying to feed, you go to McDonald's.
There you go, because Chick-fil-A is just a little bit more expensive, right? So there's a difference. So they're not afraid of that difference, though. They still have those loyal customers because of who they represent, right? And they even represent that, everything from their logo down to the food and the words they use as you go out of the line. So in your worksheet, you can define who are your competitors, what do they do, how do you want to make yourself different from them, right? And that's something to keep in mind as you're building your brand. If a company is offering a similar service, but you can do it in a different way, okay, Chick-fil-A, there are how many different fast food franchises out there? Well, Chick-fil-A does it in a different way. They're very specific in how they offer their service, right? Okay. So when I kind of mentioned this earlier, when we outline all of these elements of our brand, then we can move into marketing. And that's where, if you haven't worked on a website or anything like that, we've got Aaron and Ben who are with ARC Marketing. And that's where they really take this from the brand concept to putting this online, having an online reputation. And Charlie even takes it further when we get into ad buys, how to make your budget go as far as possible, right? So all of these elements of our brand is now how we want to represent ourselves in those marketing pieces as we're building our website, creating flyers, and maybe postcards, things like that. And one last thing, if we have time, and if you need to head out, totally fine. So on page 9, I like to do this exercise, and we're going to do it in groups, and I'm just going to, yeah, we're just going to cut you down the middle, and Tamika, you'll be on this side, and then you'll be on this side, and y'all work together in groups. What I would like to know is pick, number these logos 1 through 5 of what your favorite one is. And I put it on the screen because they're in black and white on your page, because it was cheaper to do that copy. Sorry about that. But I wanted to have the color option here. So go ahead and rank these logos in a quick discussion within your group 1 to 5, and we'll write it on the board up here since there's
Of just what you think is pretty, or
what do you think the best logo is? And is it because it's pretty, or could be other elements to it? All right, go ahead. Yep, y'all are a group, and then Tamika's with this group.
I like Vince's too. I love New York.
Yeah, I think with mine because
I
I like going to.
Yeah. And then the second one that really catches my eye, no idea what it is to see.
I like more like.
I like the colorful one.
The Belfast one is my least favorite.
Yeah.
It's
The
got
Belfast
very-
one.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really pretty simple.
It's just nothing.
I also like C. It's just very colorful. A and C is very colorful.
Yeah, it's very good too, though.
Yeah, I do like the number.
So,
Yeah.
It
it's
incorporates
very,
a lot of
so
the
there
city
Right.
in one
Gets the message
image.
across better.
Yeah, and it has their logo, you know, their name.
So y'all are saying E over there, number 1?
I don't know what that is. I don't know what A or C.
It's attractive.
What was y'all's number 1 over here?
It's-
There's also E.
Denver to mine.
I would say D.
Yeah, I
I
learned
agree.
that a lot. Cause I lived there. So.
Which one, Denver?
Yeah.
Oh, so we're all on the same page. We'll just do this one big group then. Usually if we have more brain more spread out, we can't over
Yeah.
here. Okay, so why E? Why I love New York?
Because I love it.
Are they putting out there what you want to walk away with
Yes.
if you leave New York, right?
Yeah.
They're telling you.
You're gonna
You're
love
gonna
New
love
York.
it.
So yeah.
And you hear so many different, I don't know that I've ever met anyone who did not like New York, unless there's some,
I can spoil that for you.
that's okay, now I can say there's one. All right, and then D was next, why Denver? I heard some discussion.
Color, and it was, it illustrates what, you know.
Yeah. It says the mile high city, which is what they're known for.
Yeah,
And then we have one person that lived there.
there you go. And I heard some people talk about the C, Sao Paulo, right? But some people like that, some people
I did
don't.
like the little colors. It's eye catching. I have no idea what it is. Oh, yeah.
It's a city.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's another city.
So where is it? Okay.
Brazil.
Brazil.
Yeah, so those colors especially represent a lot of carnival kind of thing, which they're known for. And I heard some people saying they didn't like A, they didn't like B.
I would have
Why not?
taken A over even, C.
A over C. Okay.
I like the colors.
What is it?
I have no idea what it is, but I like it.
Let's look back. It's another city. These are all cities.
Oh, okay.
But yeah, a lot of times A ranks the least because you don't actually, it doesn't tell you anything about, and it tells you in a representation about the city, but that can represent 1,000 different things, right? So it's not telling you, it's not getting to that point of hoping that you will come and visit because you don't know who it is. Right. So I think that some people have suggested that they should have incorporated their name around a circle or something to make you like it. And then Belfast, sometimes that actually ranks as one of the top ones. Yeah.
That is pretty plain.
Just plain, yeah. Some people wonder if they're trying to play off of the New York theme, right? So it's just kind of, it's not unique maybe to that city. Gotcha.
I'd say that the New York thing, that was probably one of the first times I saw a heart incorporated in the logo. So it was, they were kind of trendsetters at the time.
Yeah.
Talking about ancient history.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and obviously that was a good logo because it has stood the test of time, right? So, so through all of this, you've got, I'm going to kind of cut it off because I want to be respectful of everyone's time. Through this, hopefully you have gotten some ideas to help clarify what your organization represents, who you are. It may take some further work, so you get to take this with you. You can work on it more later on. But as you go through the next steps, now that you've had to have your brand defined, you need to keep those elements in mind as you develop your marketing pieces, and ask yourself as you're developing those marketing pieces, your website, flyers, business cards, a logo, maybe if you need to develop a logo, does this clarify what I'm trying to represent? Does this communicate what I'm trying to represent? Is this true to the brand? So when you have your brand defined, you should take everything you're doing should be able to relate back to those things, right? All right. Any questions or anything that you lingering that you want? I'm happy to stick around and talk, or if you need to head out and get back to work. All right. Well, we don't have to go down. Before y'all go, I had a message from Christy. There was a traffic accident on I-10 near their downtown exit with lanes closed due to a hazmat situation. So if you are headed to downtown or you're going to be on I-10, please check traffic before you leave so you don't get stuck somewhere. Yeah.
Yeah.
That happened one time, and be careful if you're leaving downtown. One time that happened,